Well, for some analysis, we can speak to Douglas Yates, a political science professor at the American Graduate School in Paris who worked in the U.S. State Department in various African countries. He joins me on set. It's good to have you here. Douglas, can you perhaps start by describing how you see the current relationship between the U.S. and the African continent?
Oh, okay. Well, we've got variable relations. So there's countries that, for example, simply were not invited. And these are countries like Eritrea, the Hermit Kingdom of Africa, and countries that have undergone coups d'etats across the Sahel, from Sudan through skipping Chad, going to Mali and down to Burkina Faso. So there's countries who we're not getting along well with. Some of them weren't at the table. Then there's countries who are good allies, like Senegal, who right now with Macky Sall being the temporary or pro tem chair of the African Union, has great relations with the U.S. And then there's countries that are kind of sitting on the fence because they've got alliances or arms agreements or receiving aid from Russia or for China, and they don't want to be anyone's enemy. And so part of our effort is to bring those who are sitting on the wall to our side and to send a clear message to our own allies that there's a difference between if you act democratically and if you act in an authoritarian manner.
You know, and the U.S. is clearly competing here for influence with China and Russia. Does Washington have any chance, do you think, in overtaking those countries when it comes to economic influence and also public opinion?
Yeah, I'm a strong believer that when the United States adopts an African policy, it makes great progress. The problem is with our alternates between the two main parties, and what we just saw happen during the last administration was that you sort of have a bipolar United States actor. One who's good, Biden, Obama, they come in, they talk about democracy, human rights, digital development, environmental protection, and then one that comes into power, that uses the N-word, that doesn't hold any summits, that tries to do transactional neocolonial behavior for energy, for oil, for minerals. And so the problem for African leaders is they're trying to figure out who they're talking to, good cop or bad cop. Right now, they're talking to good cop.
Yeah, so there's a trust issue there. How do you regain that trust?
Well, nothing works better than following up your promises with U.S. dollars. So there's a $55 billion aid package. And this is the good aid. This is aid that will go to development, to energy transition, to climate change, to security. So a lot of the aid that's been coming in from the rivals of the U.S. builds big infrastructure that extracts resources. That's not development. Or it provides mercenaries and arms. That's not security. So a lot of this $55 billion is smart aid and is designed to actually improve the lives of Africans. And so I think that we'll see. If the U.S. follows through and delivers the money that it's promised, it will bring some of those on the fence to come over. And if it doesn't, people will follow the money.
And there's also this question of getting African countries involved in the G20 group. Does that seem likely to you, and what would that mean?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, particularly as African countries can vote in bloc. The G20 is not a formal group that makes decisions, but it's a group that's there for discussion. And to have Africa express itself with one voice, which is always the problem because Africa is not a country, it's a region. To have Africa express itself with one voice through its most legitimate organization, the AU, is the best way for Africa to be present at the table. Because when you look at Africa collectively, it's got the GDP, it's got the population. But when you break it up into regions or into countries, none of them is strong enough to merit a place at the table.
And we saw this week, or actually just on Wednesday, a lawsuit filed in Kenya that accuses Facebook's parent company Meta of inflaming Ethiopia's civil war by letting violent posts flourish on Facebook. Is the African continent being overlooked when it comes to the fight against hate speech and disinformation from American tech companies?
Well, that, in fact, is the new irregular warfare that we're fighting in this new Cold War. So the big transformation socially in Africa over the last 20 years is everybody's now got a portable telephone. And as a result, control of what they get, how they get the news, the information that they receive, the marketing, mixed in with the opportunities to access the market. One of the first roundtables on the first day of this conference was on new digital development. And what the U.S. can do is it can try to insert itself. If it does, there'll be something against hate speech. But of course, we need to also work on that at home.
That's true. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this conference if the U.S. can uphold its promises. Douglas Yates, always a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. That's political science professor Douglas Yates.